Wire snapped sharp in Elias Mercer's hands as he wrenched a sagging gate back into place, then froze at the sound behind him, a body hitting dirt, breath breaking. He turned and pulled a bleeding woman from the brush, her strength slipping with every step. The wind tugged his coat, revealing the pale scar circling his ring finger. Then he saw it, fresh tracks, too many, closing in. 2 small children clung to her. "Just save my children, leave me." Elias looked to the ridge. Because choosing who to save was about to cost him everything he had left. Before we ride deeper into the story, hit subscribe, ring the bell, so you'll never miss another ride through the legends of the Wild West. Now, let's get back to the trail. Elias crossed the yard in 3 strides and caught the woman before she pitched forward again. She was lighter than she ought to have been, too light for a grown woman with children, travel-worn, dust in the seams of her dress. Hair torn loose by brush and wind, he smelled blood, horse sweat, and the sharp, bitter scent of fear. Easy now. She tried to pull away. Pride still lived in her even then. No time. "There's time enough to stand," he said. He got an arm around her and hauled her upright. The wind tugged his coat open, bearing the pale ring of scar around the finger where a band had once sat for years. The woman's eyes flicked to it without seeing. She was looking past him over his shoulder toward the rise above the creek bed. Then Elias saw what had frozen her blood before it reached his yard. Tracks. Fresh. Many of them. Horses coming hard and then breaking wide. Not the scattered print of ranch hands or traders. A riding party, careful enough to spread once they neared the place. Whoever they were, they did not want to arrive in a clump like fools. The woman gripped his sleeve with surprising strength. "Just save my children, leave me." The little girl looked up at him. Her face was dusty. One cheek bore the mark of dried tears, but her eyes were steady, not child-steady, the hard steadiness of somebody who had already seen too much. Elias glanced at the ridge, nothing there yet but sun glare and a strip of moving grass. He bent and lifted the boy with one arm. The child made a frightened sound and clutched at Elias' shirt. With the other arm, he caught the woman around the waist. "Get inside," he said to the girl. She did not move. Now. That got through. She ran for the house, thin legs pumping, shoes slapping the hard yard. Elias pushed the woman ahead of him and headed after her. Twice she stumbled. Twice he held her up. The cabin door banged back against the wall. Cool shadow swallowed them. Elias set the boy on the table, eased the woman into the straight-backed chair by the stove, and turned to the girl. "Water in the blue crock." She stared, breath quivering. "Can you do that?" She nodded once and ran. The boy had both fists locked around the edge of the table. He was all bones and wide eyes beneath a cap of brown hair, dust streaked across his cheeks. He did not cry now. He only watched Elias the way small animals watched men with traps in their hands. Elias knelt before the woman and carefully moved her hand from her side. The wound sat low beneath the ribs, not a clean gunshot. Knife, maybe. Or torn flesh from brush and stone after a fall. The bleeding had slowed, but not enough. He fetched a clean towel from the shelf, folded it hard and pressed it there. She bit back a cry. Her face went white under the dust. "If I let go, you press." She obeyed. The girl came with the water, sloshing half of it over her hands. Elias took the crock, poured some across the towel and washed what blood he could see. The woman sucked in breath through her teeth. He found the needle and thread from the tin by the mantel, set them beside the lamp, and put the kettle on though it was still afternoon. Only then did he hear the distant sound he had expected. Hoofbeats, far off. Enough men to raise a murmur through the ground. The woman heard it too. She closed her eyes as if the sound itself had struck her. You must go, take them out the back. There's a wash east of here, cottonwoods, stay low. Who's after you? Her lips tightened. Who? The little girl answered because the mother would not. Bad men. The woman opened her eyes at once. Anna. The girl lowered her head, but not before Elias caught the shame there. Children blamed themselves quick for telling truth adults were trying to hold shut. Elias looked from mother to daughter. Names. Silence, then the woman said, Clara. The girl whispered, Anna. The boy, still gripping the table, said nothing. He only watched Elias with dark, solemn eyes. And him. Ben. Elias nodded once. I'm Elias Mercer. Clara swallowed. I know. That gave him pause. But there was no time to ask how. The hoofbeats were louder now, still not near the yard but near enough to matter. He crossed to the window and peered through the corner where the curtain had faded thin. Nothing yet, still below the rise. He had choices, not many, none clean. The safe thing would be to take the children and run the east wash exactly as she said. Leave the woman here and buy the small ones a chance. If the riders wanted her bad enough, perhaps they would stop. Perhaps they would not search farther. Perhaps he knew what perhaps was worth. A grave, a shawl folded in a trunk, a little wooden horse still sitting on a shelf because no hand had come back to claim it. His wife had died in a winter fever 8 years gone. His son 2 days after. He had not been able to save either. Men told him later there had been nothing to do. Men liked such sentences. They cost the speaker nothing. He looked at Clara again. Her shoulders trembled beneath the strain of sitting upright. The girl stood pressed against the stove, jaw clenched. The boy had slid down from the table and now clung to his sister's skirt. No, he stepped back from the window. No one gets left. Clara stared at him as if she had not heard plain English. You don't know what's coming. Maybe not. He reached for the rifle by the door, but I know what I won't do. A knock sounded from outside, not hard, not urgent, a neighbor's knock. Elias opened the door only enough to see Vernon Pike standing on the porch with his hat in his hand and worry sitting deep around his eyes. Vernon ran the spread a mile west and had spent all his life measuring danger before it entered the gate. I saw riders down by the creek, Vernon said low. Then his gaze slid past Elias' shoulder and found the strangers inside. Lord. Need a doctor. You need more than that. Vernon stepped in without waiting. His wife had once midwifed half the valley. He took one look at the blood and turned grim. Me can help stitch, I'll fetch her. Bring Doc Harlan too. Vernon hesitated. Elias, who are these people? Folks in trouble. That much I can see. Vernon's eyes moved to Clara, then back. Those riders' trouble. Likely. Vernon's jaw worked. Then listen to me, send them on. Now, before the men on that ridge decide this place is part of whatever they're running from. Elias said nothing. Think, man, you live alone out here. No sons, no brothers in the yard. If there's blood feud riding down out of the hills, you don't hang a lantern and invite it inside. A faint flush crossed Clara's face. Shame, fear, maybe both. Elias kept his voice flat. You going for me? Vernon looked at him another long second. I am, but you hear me. Trouble carried over a threshold becomes your own. It crossed already. Vernon swore softly, shoved his hat back on and went. The sound of his horse faded westward. Inside the cabin, the kettle hissed. Elias cleaned the needle with whiskey, then fire. Clara watched each motion with a strange, quiet resignation. "You know stitches?" she asked. "Enough. I may faint. Do it after." A hint of something almost like a smile touched her mouth, then vanished. He worked carefully. The wound was ugly but not mortal if fever stayed away. Clara's fingers dug crescent moons into the chair arms. She made only one sound, small and raw, when the final stitch pulled tight. Anna moved to her mother at once, pressing close without getting in the way. Ben stood by the stove, clutching a wooden spoon he had found, as if it were a weapon. When Elias finished binding the cloth around Clara's ribs, hoofbeats rose again. Near now, too near. He went to the window. 3 riders had crested the ridge, not the full number the tracks suggested. Scouts then. Watching before the rest committed, suns struck along rifle barrels. The lead rider raised a hand and pointed at the cabin. Elias stepped away from the glass. "Can you stand?" he asked Clara. "Why?" "Because if they come in here, I need you able to move." She pushed herself up, swayed, steadied. He looked at the children. "You too, under the bed when I tell you, not before you hear me." Anna nodded. Ben copied her half a beat later. There came another knock, this one hard enough to jar the frame. Elias opened the door and stepped onto the porch, pulling it closed behind him. The 3 riders had come only halfway down the yard. They sat their horses with the loose stillness of men used to saddles and guns. Their faces were lean, weathered, unreadable. Not outlaws in the common fashion, no drunken slouch, no gaudy neckerchief. One wore a dark coat cut from old army cloth. Another had a scar through his eyebrow. The third, the youngest, held himself coiled tight, hungry for orders. The leader spoke first. "You see a woman come through here." Elias rested one hand near the rifle at his thigh. "Maybe." The youngest rider shifted. "He's lying." The leader silenced him with one glance. His gaze returned to Elias. A woman with 2 children, 1 girl, 1 boy. Elias said, "Who's asking?" The man's eyes sharpened. "Rafe Cutter." The name meant nothing good. Elias had heard it once in town from a freighter who said Cutter rode escort for men too mean to hire proper law and too rich to fear consequences. "What do you want with them?" Elias asked. Rafe Cutter smiled without warmth. "That's business." "Not mine then." The young rider spat into the dust. "He's got them." Rafe did not deny it. He only watched Elias like a man studying fence wire for weakness. "You know the decent thing is to hand over strangers that drag danger behind them." Elias leaned one shoulder against the porch post. "Decent's a broad word." "We won't search your house without leave," Rafe said. "I'm offering respect." "No," Elias said. A beat passed. Rafe's smile thinned. "No what?" "No leave." The young rider took one step forward in the stirrups. "We can burn him out." Rafe lifted a hand again. He seemed a man who liked power best when he had not yet used it. "You've got till sundown," he said to Elias. "Then I come back with more men and less patience." He reined his horse around. The other 2 followed. At the far edge of the yard, he looked back once. "Whatever that woman told you, she did not tell the whole of it." Then they rode off. Elias stayed on the porch until the dust settled. Only then did he go inside. Clara had heard enough. Her face had gone hollow. "You should have let them take me," she said. "And the children." "I told you," Save them. No. Her eyes flashed then, strength suddenly flaring through the pain. You stubborn fool, do you think I say it for pride? That man will kill anybody between him and what he wants. What's he want? She looked at Anna, looked at Ben, and closed her mouth. Elias felt something in his chest harden, not at her. At the wall of fear around whatever truth she carried. You expect me to stand for you blind. I expect nothing. Her voice broke on the last word and steadied again by force. That's the trouble. By dusk me Pike had come with Vernon and old Doc Harlan. Me brought broth, blankets, and the kind of quiet authority that pushed grief into corners and made room for work. Doc Harlan peered at Clara's wound, grunted that Elias had done a serviceable job for a man more used to branding calves, and mixed powder against fever. Vernon walked the yard with Elias while the sun turned red behind the hills. There'll be more than 3 next time, Vernon said. I know. You could send word to town. For what? Half those men would stay behind shuttered windows till the smoke cleared. Vernon did not argue. He had lived among the same people. They reached the corral. Elias checked the cinches on his saddle by habit more than need. Vernon saw it. You're thinking to ride. Elias looked toward the darkening east. Maybe. Into what? Whatever's behind this. Vernon sucked air through his teeth. You don't even know if the woman's worth the risk. Elias fastened the bedroll. That's not the measure. It ought to be. No, it ought to be whether the thing done to her was. Vernon was quiet a long moment. Crickets had begun in the grass. A hawk wheeled black against the last light. Your trouble, Elias, he said finally, is you still think pain makes sense if a man faces it square enough. And yours. That I know it do. He put a hand on the rail. Me says the little girl hasn't left the boy's side once. Says she keeps checking the door between every breath. That's not common fear, that's trained fear. Elias nodded. Vernon looked toward the cabin. If you go, I'll stay with them till dawn. That's enough. It may not be. No, Elias said, it may not. Inside, me had settled the children on Elias' bed. Ben slept at last, one grubby hand curled under his chin. Anna remained awake, sitting straight-backed despite the blanket around her. Clara lay on the narrow cot by the stove, fever glow already touching her cheeks. Doc Harlan packed his bag. Keep her cool, change the cloth, pray the wound don't sour. Me touched Elias' arm as the doctor shuffled out. The girl wants to talk to you. Elias crossed to the bed. Anna watched him without blinking. You mind your mamma good, he said. She whispered, he killed my pa. The words landed with no more sound than dust, and yet they shook the whole room. Clara shut her eyes. Elias crouched so the girl did not have to crane her neck. Who did? The man on the horse, the one with the pale eyes. She swallowed. Mr. Cutter. Clara turned her face to the wall. A mother's grief lay in that motion, but so did surrender. She had run out of strength to hold the truth back. Why? Elias asked softly. Anna looked at her hands. Pa worked for him, drove wagons. He found something he wasn't meant to see. What thing? She shook her head. Pa said we had to leave, said men would come, they did. Me drew a slow breath behind Elias. Clara spoke then, voice dry as old paper. There was a killing, not my husband's, before. She opened her eyes and looked at Elias directly for the first time since entering his house. a U.S. Marshal out of Fort Stanton. Cutter and the men he rode with killed him north of the river, took papers from his saddlebag. My husband helped bury the body because a gun was at his head. Afterward, he stole one paper from fear they would kill us all to keep us quiet. He meant to trade it for safe passage later. Cutter found out. Elias waited. "There's more," she whispered. The paper names ranchers, traders, and one town official taking stolen cattle through tribal land, then blaming raids on the tribes to hide it. The marshal had enough to hang men. Vernon, standing in the doorway, let out a curse. Clara went on, each word costing. "My husband hid the paper. Before he died, he told me where. Cutter burned our wagon, searched our things, chased us 3 days. He thinks I still carry it." "Do you?" Elias asked. She looked toward Anna. The girl's small chin lifted. From inside the hem of her dress, she drew a folded oilskin packet no bigger than a man's palm. "Not Clara, Anna." Me put a hand over her mouth. The girl held the packet tight. "Pa put it in my skirt, told me never to tell." Elias felt the shape of the story change in that instant. This was no longer a woman fleeing one cruel man. This was a fuse running toward powder kegs laid under half the valley. Vernon spoke first. "Burn it." All heads turned. He held up both hands at once. "Hear me. Burn that paper and Cutter loses his reason to hunt. No proof, no hanging, no war stirred between town and tribe by men wanting profit." Me stared at him. "That's your answer." "My answer is keeping children alive." Elias said nothing. He only watched Anna clutch the oilskin. Clara's voice came low. "If it burns, my husband dies for nothing, the marshal too." Vernon spread his hands helplessly. "And if it don't, more men may die for it." There it was, the whole matter laid bare. Honor or safety, truth or survival. Elias looked at the little girl with the paper pressed to her chest. He looked at Clara, pale with pain, but still trying to hold her family together from a sickbed. He thought of men in town who would rather blame a tribe than question a profitable lie. He thought of Rafe Cutter's pale eyes. "Where was your husband taking it?" he asked. Clara answered, "To Red Wash, to a man called Two Hawks. My husband traded with his people sometimes. He trusted him more than any sheriff. Said Two Hawks had once ridden with scouts for the army and knew how to get a paper into the right hands." Vernon barked a humorless laugh. "So now you mean to ride straight into tribal country with a dead marshal's proof and a hunted family?" Elias stood. "Me saw it in him first. You've decided." "Yes." Vernon swore again, louder this time. Elias ignored him. "Cutter will return with more men. He'll search the house. If we stay, we lose the paper and maybe our lives. If we ride before dawn, we keep some choice." "Choice?" Vernon snapped. "That country beyond Red Wash is no place for wounded women and children." "Neither is here." Me moved beside Clara and began folding blankets with swift, practical hands. "Then we leave in the dark." Vernon stared at his wife as if betrayed by heaven. "Me." She did not look up. "You told him trouble over a threshold becomes your own. Well, it has." They left an hour before sunrise. The moon had gone down. The world was all charcoal shapes and pale breath. Elias saddled both horses, packed water, flour, bacon, coffee, and cartridges, and lashed Clara's cot mattress across the wagon bed to soften the jolts. Vernon brought his mule team without another word of protest. Me bundled Clara tight and lifted Ben beside her. Anna climbed in without help, keeping the oilskin packet hidden somewhere on her person. Doc Harlan left a bottle of laudanum and a warning about fever. By the time the east turned thin and gray, Elias was on horseback ahead of the wagon, leading them down the dry wash beyond his lower pasture. The land opened slow around them. Sage, rock, stunted cedar. Here and there the skeleton of a cottonwood by a cut bank where floodwater ran in the spring. Elias kept them out of sight where he could. Above them, the ridges burned pink with dawn. Ben woke and cried once when the wagon lurched over stone. Clara hushed him, though her own face had tightened with pain. Anna sat near the tailboard and watched the back trail like a sentry. They traveled hard till sunup, then slower as the heat climbed. Vernon drove in silence. Me kept a damp cloth on Clara's brow. Elias rode the rises and scanned the country. By noon he saw them, 3 specks south behind them, then 4, then gone as the land swallowed them. He dropped back to the wagon. They've got our trail. Vernon gripped the reins harder. How far? Half a day, maybe. Me looked at Clara. Can you hold? I can hold. Clara said it the way people said prayers they no longer expected answered. At mid-afternoon, they reached the narrows where the wash cut between red stone walls and twisted into rougher country. Elias halted them in shade and knelt to study the ground. Other tracks here. Horses, yes, but older. Moccasin prints too. Several, not hidden. Observed, he rose slowly. We are watched. Vernon's face drained. By who? Elias pointed at a ledge above. No one visible. Still, the sense of eyes on them had weight. By people better at it than us. He lifted both hands from his sides and called into the stone. We come peaceful. Nothing answered, only the scrape of a lizard somewhere in the heat. Then from behind a boulder 20 yards off, a boy of perhaps 14 stood up as if he had grown from the rock itself. He held a bow. Another appeared on the ledge. Then 2 more. No one aimed, but no one smiled either. Elias kept his hands plain. I seek 2 hawks. The first boy's face did not change. Why? Because a dead man trusted him. The boy looked toward the wagon. His gaze found Clara, the children, the blood-stained blanket. He said something in his own tongue toward the ridge. A moment later, an older man rode down from a hidden path, gray threaded through the braids at his temples, posture straight as a lance. His eyes settled on Elias, assessing, quiet, dangerous in the way deep water was dangerous. I am called 2 hawks, he said. Clara made a sound that was almost relief. Elias inclined his head. Then we need your help. 2 hawks did not move closer yet. Many men need help. Few bring it clean. He looked at the wagon, then at the dust cloud faint in the south behind them. His gaze sharpened. You are followed. Yes. And you came here anyway. Yes. A long pause. Then 2 hawks said, that means either courage or foolishness. Sometimes the same face wears both. He gestured once, come. They were led through a winding cut in the stone Elias would not have found alone, into a hidden basin where cottonwoods gathered around a thread of water, and several lodges stood back among the rocks. Women looked up from fires. Children stopped mid-play. Men rose from shade. Every eye went to the strangers. The isolation Elias had held down all day pressed suddenly on his chest. He was deep in country where his skin, his horse, his rifle, the very cut of his hat marked him as outsider. One wrong word, and no town law would reach this place. Perhaps that was why Clara's husband had trusted it. They settled her in the shade of a lodge. An old woman with hands like roots examined the wound, muttered disapproval at the rough stitches, and set to work improving them while Clara bit her lip bloodless. Ben clung to me until one of the tribal women offered him a carved wooden horse and won him half a step away. Anna would not leave the oilskin packet, not even to drink. Two hawks sat across from Elias near the water as late light slanted through the basin. No crowd gathered, but Elias knew they listened. Authority carried a quiet around it. Two hawks held out his hand. Anna looked at Clara. Clara nodded. Slowly, the girl crossed the space and placed the oilskin in the leader's palm. He unfolded it with care. The paper inside was stained, creased, and still legible. His face changed, almost not at all while reading, yet Elias sensed the shift. Recognition, anger held in leash, old knowledge finding proof. At last two hawks refolded it. "This paper names men I already suspected," he said. "Not all, enough." He looked at Elias. "Why bring it to me?" "Because the woman's husband said you'd know what to do with it." "That is his trust, not yours." "No," Elias said. "Mine was a smaller thing. I chose not to lave them." Two hawks watched him. Elias felt every ear on the basin turn sharper. The older man asked, "Why?" It was the same question the land had been putting to him since yesterday. Why risk the ranch? Why risk the ride? Why take strangers' danger into his own house? Elias answered simple, because simple was true. "Because the children were looking at me." Silence followed, not approval, not yet, just silence. A weighing, two hawks said at last, "Many men speak of honor when other men are watching. Fewer keep it when a child is." He folded the paper once more and tucked it into his vest. "Rafe Cutter works for men who would spill blood between our people and the town to hide their theft. If they think I hold proof, they may strike here." Vernon shifted uneasily nearby. Elias said, "Then tell me where to ride with it next." Two hawks' mouth hardened a fraction. "You think this is still your road?" "It became my road when they came to my gates." At that, something like the ghost of respect flickered in the older man's face. "Perhaps." He looked toward the south. "Cutter will come before morning. He knows enough trails to guess. He will not ask peace." "And you?" Elias asked. "I ask it when it is wise. I defend when it is not." The basin held its breath. Then two hawks rose. "Tonight we see what kind of man follows the paper." Camp was all whispers and firelight after dark. Elias sat a little apart near the tethered horses, cleaning his rifle by habit, though the motions were more for steadiness than necessity. From the lodge behind him came Clara's low murmur to her children. Somewhere farther off a drumbeat started and stopped, not for ceremony but for signaling perhaps. Men moved through shadows without wasted motion. Me slept at last from exhaustion. Vernon did not sleep. He crouched by the wagon with a shotgun over his knees and muttered every few minutes about the size of the fool bargain he had been dragged into. Near midnight, two hawks came and sat beside Elias. For a while neither spoke. Then the older man said, "Your people tell stories about mine when they want fear to do their work for them. Mine tell stories about everything they fear." Two hawks nodded slightly. "So do mine." The fire cracked. Beyond it, cottonwood leaves whispered over the water. "My son died at 12, two hawks said." Elias turned. "Soldiers chasing another band rode through our camp in winter. They took horses, burned food. My boy grew sick after. By spring he was gone." The older man looked into the flames. "I wanted every blue coat dead." For many years, that anger fed me when food did not. Elias said nothing. It did not feel like a moment for speech. Two hawks continued. Then one winter, a soldier left medicine for my granddaughter when the fort doctor would not come. One act, small, yet anger had to make room around it, and I learned how tiring hate becomes when truth keeps interrupting. He looked at Elias. You wear grief like a second coat. Elias stared into the same fire. My wife, my boy, fever. Two hawks inclined his head once. No pity in it, only recognition. That somehow made it bearable. You refused the woman because you could not leave her without meeting your dead again, two hawks said. Elias let out a breath. Maybe. That is not the whole of honor, but it is often where men first find it. Before Elias could answer, a shout cut the basin. Not alarm, signal, men rose at once. Elias was on his feet before he knew he'd moved. A scout came down from the rim at a run. He spoke fast in his own tongue. Two hawks listened, then turned to Elias. Cutter comes with 8. Only 8. 8 seen, more may be held back. The camp gathered like a hand closing. Women drew children inside. Older boys carried water and ammunition. Two hawks gave orders in a level voice. No panic, no wasted breath. Elias took position near the narrow entrance to the basin with Vernon beside him and 3 of 2 hawks, men posted among the rocks above. The moon gave little, shapes more than faces. The whole world reduced to stone, shadow, and the pulse beating in a man's wrists. They heard the riders before they saw them. Then came Rafe, Cutter's voice from the dark beyond the pass. You hide behind rock now, Mercer. Elias answered, you hide behind numbers. A short laugh came back, fair enough. He rode into view at last, horse picking careful among the stones, 6 men flanking 2 farther back. Pale eyes, hat brim low, confidence sitting on him like property. He looked first to Elias, then to the men above on the rocks, then to 2 hawks who had stepped out beside the pass. So, recognition there too. Thought you might come here, Rafe said. 2 hawks replied, and I thought you might follow death where it leads. Rafe ignored the insult. Hand over the woman and the paper, no one else need blade. Elias heard Vernon suck a breath through his nose. It was the offer of wolves. Step aside and be spared the first bite. 2 hawks said, you killed a lawman. Rafe's face never twitched. That's a claim. We have proof. Rafe smiled. On paper, papers burn. Men remember. Men can be buried. The basin went still as a drawn wire. Then Rafe did something clever. He shifted his gaze to Elias alone. You hear that, Mercer? This isn't your fight. Give me what I came for and ride home. Let these people keep their old grudges. It was bait for every prejudice in the valley, every easy line a frightened man might choose. Elias answered, the fight came to my gate, that made it mine enough. Rafe's eyes cooled. Then maybe you're as foolish as they say. A gunshot cracked from the dark, not from Elias' side. One of Rafe's own men jerked in the saddle and toppled backward, an arrow buried in his throat. Confusion ripped through their line. Another shot answered from the rocks. Horses screamed, men shouted. The pass exploded. Elias fired once and saw muzzle flash bloom orange from the shadows opposite. Stone chipped by his cheek. Vernon's shotgun thundered. Above them, arrows hissed down. Cutter's men tried to press through the narrows and found no room. Their horses bunched. 2 went down. Another rider turned to flee and was dragged from the saddle by his falling mount. Elias worked the rifle with cold hands and clear eyes. There was no glory in it, just breath, aim, recoil. A man rose behind a boulder and Elias dropped him. Another fired wild. Vernon cursed and reloaded with shaking fingers. Then Rafe Cutter broke the pattern. Instead of forcing the pass, he spurred left along the rock face toward a narrow shelf path barely wide enough for one horse. He had known the ground better than Elias thought. "He's circling," Elias shouted. "Two hawks saw it too, with me." They ran, not rode. No time. Elias and two of the tribal men climbed the shelf path on foot, loose stones skidding under their boots. Gunfire echoed below, fading in bursts as the main fight broke apart. Ahead, Cutter had dismounted and was moving fast through the rocks toward the rear of camp where the lodges sat in shadow, toward Clara. Elias climbed harder. By the time he reached the basin rim behind camp, one of two hawks' men was already down, blood black in the moonlight. Another crawled behind a cedar, dragging his leg. Cutter had slipped between them like a knife between ribs. Elias cut through the trees. He found Cutter near the lodge where Clara and the children had been hidden. The outlaw had Clara by the arm, gun at her head, dragging her half out the doorway. Anna stood behind her mother, clutching Ben with one hand and a kitchen knife with the other, so tight her knuckles shone white. The sight of that small blade in the child's fist struck Elias harder than any bullet. Cutter saw him and grinned without joy. "Now there's the righteous rancher. Let her go. You've got no bargain in you, Mercer." Cutter dug the gun harder against Clara's temple. "But maybe you've got sense. Drop it." Elias let the rifle hang a fraction lower, not dropped. "Not yet." Clara's breath shook. Still she managed, "Don't." Anna whispered, "Mr. Elias." Cutter barked, "Quiet." Elias took one slow step. "You won't make the rim alive with all three. I only need the girl." His eyes flicked to Anna. "Little magpie S had my paper long enough." Something in Elias went very calm. "No." Cutter laughed. "There you are again with that word." He did not see Ben move. The little boy wriggled free of Anna's grip, stumbled forward 2 steps like a drunk calf, and threw the carved wooden horse he had been clutching all night. It struck Cutter uselessly in the shoulder, no force to it, no real harm, but the insult of innocence distracted him a heartbeat. Anna lunged with the kitchen knife. She did not reach him. Clara twisted instead, jerking Cutter's arm. The gun fired. The shot blasted splinters from the lodge post. Elias pulled the trigger at the same instant. Cutter staggered back, surprise filling his pale eyes as if pain were a language he had not expected to hear spoken to him. He looked down at the dark stains spreading across his coat, then up once more at Elias. For a moment the whole camp held still around that breath. Then Cutter folded to his knees. He did not die at once. He sat in the dirt, one hand pressed to his belly, breathing shallow and wet. The gun had fallen beyond reach. Clara sagged against the lodge wall. Anna dragged Ben behind her and still held the knife, though it trembled now from the effort. 2 hawks arrived with 3 others just as dawn touched the east. He took in the scene in one sweep. Elias with the rifle, Clara white-faced and shaking, the children, Cutter bleeding in the dust. The older man looked from Elias to the outlaw. "He lives." "For now," Elias said, "then your true test begins." Men bound Cutter's hands and laid him beneath a cottonwood. The basin smelled of blood, smoke, and wet earth. 2 of his riders had escaped in the night. 4 lay dead in the pass. 2 had been taken wounded. The rest would never ride again. Clara's wound had opened in the struggle, but not badly. The old woman who tended her said she would live if left in peace. Anna finally let go of the knife and vomited behind the lodge. Ben cried then, not from fresh fear, but from the breaking of it. When the sun rose full, two hawks called the adults to the center of camp. Cutter lay on a blanket between them, pale, sweating, still conscious. His eyes moved from face to face, hunting for weakness. Two hawks held the marshal's paper in one hand. "This man killed for greed," he said. "He hunted a widow and children. He sought to turn blame upon my people for crimes of white men. His death would satisfy many." No one argued. The older man turned to Elias. "He was caught in your defense. The woman came first to your gate. Speak." Every gaze settled on Elias. He had not wanted such weight, had never asked for it, yet there it was, heavier than any rifle he had lifted. Vernon muttered under his breath, "Don't overthink this one." Clara sat wrapped in blankets, Anna beside her, Ben asleep across both laps. She did not speak, but her eyes held Elias. Revenge would be easy, necessary, some would say. Cutter had earned death several times over. Even the law in town might shoot him before hearing, yet something ugly lived in easy answers. Elias knew it, had known since fever took his family and men told him whiskey and time would solve what neither understood. He looked at Cutter. The man met his gaze and smiled faintly through pain. "Whatever you pick, Mercer, the ones behind me stay hidden." Maybe so, maybe not. If they killed him here, the paper remained, but a living tongue would be gone. If they took him to town, the very men named in the paper might free him or hang him quick to silence him before names spread. If they turned him over to the army, perhaps a formal trial, or perhaps another grave in the wrong patch of earth. Justice or vengeance, mercy or safety, principle or the easier road. Elias said, "He stands witness as much as prisoner." Vernon groaned aloud. Cutter laughed once, then coughed blood. Two hawks did not move. "Go on. We take him alive to Fort Stanton, not town, not sheriff, army post. Put the paper in command's hands with the prisoner breathing to answer for it." Vernon snapped, "That's 3 days with a snake in the wagon." "A snake can still point to its den." Cutter's eyes narrowed. He had hoped for hatred, hatred he understood. He did not like being used as evidence. Two hawks studied Elias a long time. Many among my people would call that softness. Then they'd be wronged. Two hawks' gaze shifted to Clara, "And you?" Clara looked at Cutter. Her face did not change, but the grief in it seemed to age years in a single breath. "I want him dead," she said. "I have wanted nothing else since my husband fell." She tightened her hold on Ben. "But if my children grow under a lie and men go on killing under that lie, then my wanting is too small." The basin listened. She raised her eyes to Elias. "Take him alive." Anna did not speak. She only leaned against her mother and stared at Cutter with the terrible stillness of children learning what mercy costs. Two hawks folded the paper and tucked it away. "Then it will be done." Not all agreed. Elias heard the dissent in murmurs along the edge of camp. One young warrior argued openly that a dead wolf bit no more calves. Another said white soldiers could not be trusted to punish white thieves. Both were likely right in part. Two hawks answered them in their own tongue. His voice never rose. Yet when he finished, the murmurs died. Later Elias asked what he had said. The older man replied that if we kill every enemy when anger demands it, then anger becomes our chief and not me. They left the next morning with a small party. Elias rode point. Vernon drove the wagon because grumbling was easier for him than surrender. Clara and the children remained with me and the camp until the road proved safe. 2 hawks sent 3 men along, including a broad-shouldered tracker named Marto and the young lookout from the rocks, who answered to Nanton and watched Elias as if still making up his mind. Cutter rode tied in the wagon bed between sacks of grain, feverish from the wound, dangerous still. The first day passed in hard silence. The second brought storm. Clouds rolled over the mesas by noon. Wind slapped dust into their eyes and sent the mule team skittish. Rain followed in short, violent bursts, turning the trails slick. Twice, they nearly tipped the wagon in a ravine. Once Cutter laughed weakly and said, "Be damned funny if Mercy drowns." Vernon nearly shot him for that alone. By evening, they made camp under a rock overhang. Elias took first watch, Nanton second. Marto slept like a man who trusted himself to wake at danger's first whisper. Some time passed, midnight Cutter spoke from the dark. "You think the army'll thank you?" "No. You think the paper hangs the men behind me?" "Maybe." Cutter shifted with a chain clink. "Men like that don't hang, they buy distance. They trade names. They feed a smaller wolf to spare the pack." Elias said nothing. Cutter's voice dropped. "You should have killed me in camp." "Why?" "Because alive, I can still choose." Elias looked at him then. Rain dripped from the rock lip. The outlaw's face was gaunt in the dark, eyes fever bright. "Choose what?" "How many names I give." There it was, the real game, survival bargaining against truth. "You give them all," Elias said. Cutter smiled faintly. "Or what?" Elias let the question sit between them with the rain. At last he answered, "Or I stop arguing for you." Cutter's smile faded. On the third day they reached the military road. By noon, Fort Stanton's walls rose pale above the scrub like something built by men who trusted stone more than horizon. The sentry at the gate nearly laughed them away at first. A rancher, a neighbor, 2 tribal escorts, and a wounded prisoner claiming corruption among traders and officials. Such things sounded like frontier fever. Then 2 hawks, folded paper was placed in the captain's hands. Captain Hollis read it standing in the yard. His face changed by degrees, first irritation, then attention, then a stillness that made the men nearby step back without knowing why. "Bring the prisoner inside," he said. The questioning lasted hours. Elias gave his account plain. Vernon gave his with complaints added. Marto and Nanton spoke only what they had seen. Cutter held back at first exactly as promised, offering half-truths and smirks. Then Captain Hollis read aloud one particular name from the paper: Judge Bellamy Fitch, town circuit judge, occasional ranch investor, a man who had dined twice at Vernon's table. Cutter went white. He had not known that name was written there. After that the rest came slower, uglier and fuller. Cattle routes hidden through tribal land, bribes paid to deputies to look the other way, raids staged against abandoned wagons, then blamed on whatever tribe was nearest. The dead marshal's name, where his body had been put, which trader financed the whole chain. By evening messengers were already riding. Captain Hollis kept the paper under lock and Cutter under guard heavier than a bank chest. He offered Elias a room, a meal, and thanks so stiffly worded they sounded like orders. Elias accepted the meal. When he finally rode back toward Red Wash 2 days later with official copies of statements sealed in oilskin, the world looked the same and not the same at all. The same mesas, same hawks, same long strips of sun on rock. Yet the lie beneath them had been cracked open, and once a lie broke, it never fit the land quite the same again. Clara was waiting in Two Hawks' basin when they returned, not standing. She was still too weak. But upright on a blanket beneath the cottonwoods, Anna beside her braiding grass stems, Ben asleep with his head in her lap. When Elias dismounted, Anna ran to him so fast he barely had time to kneel before she hit his chest. He held her a little awkwardly at first, then less so. "Did you do it?" she asked against his shirt. "Yes." "Is he dead?" "No." She pulled back to study his face, perhaps deciding whether that answer pleased or angered her. In the end, she only nodded once, as if storing away a hard lesson she would understand years later. Clara looked up at him. "Thank you." The words were simple, still they seemed to carry all the miles behind them. Two Hawks joined them by the water. "The army has sent for the marshal's body," he said, "and for the judge." Vernon let out a low whistle. "Fitch won't enjoy that ride." "Nor should he," Two Hawks said. Some matters still needed finishing. Clara could not travel far yet. Elias could not remain in the basin forever. The question of what came next hung over them all. It was settled in part by news from town. A week later, Vernon returned from buying feed with more gossip than supplies. Judge Fitch had been taken under guard. One deputy had fled and been caught drunk near the county line. Two ranchers named in the paper were swearing innocence loud enough to shake church windows. Half the town now spoke of peace with the tribes, and the other half spoke of betrayal, which was often how peace first entered a place. Elias listened from the corral while tightening a cinch strap. Vernon leaned on the fence, enjoying his own telling. "And now," he said, "folks act like they always suspected something crooked. Amazing how honest men become once a captain starts reading names off a page." Elias grunted. Vernon sobered. "There's talk, too, about you." "There's always talk. This kind's different." He hesitated, which was unlike him. "What?" "Some say you stirred things better left quiet. Others say you kept a war from starting, near equal parts." Elias slid the strap through the buckle. "Means nothing then." "Means you've gone from invisible to argued over. That's something." At sunset, Elias walked down to the creek beyond camp, where cottonwoods spread cool shade over the bank. Clara sat there alone, mending one of Ben's shirts. Her face had regained some color. The wound still pulled at her, but she no longer looked like a gust might take her. He stopped a respectful distance off. "How are you?" "Alive enough to sew badly." He sat on a fallen trunk nearby. For a while they listened to the water. It ran low and steady, slipping around stones the way years slipped around grief, never asking permission. Clara spoke first. "Anna told me she threw herself at you when you came back." "She did. I'm sorry if she..." "I'm not." That brought the faintest smile. She set the shirt in her lap. "I have been thinking what comes next." "So have I." "I could go east," she said. "There's an aunt in Abilene if she still lives. Or I could stay near Vernon and me till harvest, work where I can." Elias nodded, though the thought landed strangely in him. She looked at the creek. "Truth is, I am tired of running toward people who already belonged to each other before I arrived." He knew that feeling well enough not to ask her to explain. After a moment she said, "Anna told me what you said, that no one gets left." "I said it." "I do not think any man has said such a thing to me, and meant it since my husband died." Elias looked at his hands. Scarred, weather-cut, a little older each season, hands that knew fences, rains, grave, and not much else. I meant it. I know. That quiet stretched between them, not empty now, but careful. Days turned into 2 weeks, then 3. Clara and the children came to Elias' ranch after 2 hawks judged the road safe enough. Not to stay forever, she said, only until she could mend proper and decide her next move. Me brought flour, extra quilts, and a look that told Elias the valley had already made its guess and would keep making it whether he approved or not. Life changed by inches. Such things often did. Ben learned the yard first, toddling after chickens with solemn purpose. Anna took to helping at the pump, carrying wood too heavy for her and refusing aid unless she truly had to have it. Clara moved slower but steadier each day, sweeping, cooking, and then arguing gently when Elias told her she owed no labor for a roof. I can't sit at a table and eat another person's bread forever. It's my bread. Then I'll earn yours and eat my share. He had no answer that did not sound foolish, so he let her win. The valley changed too. A delegation from town rode to meet 2 hawks beneath a white flag and with far more humility than usual. Nothing magical came of it. No sudden brotherhood. Too much history sat between them for that. But trade resumed on cleaner terms. 2 men publicly admitted false claims against a band they had blamed for missing stock. Apologies came awkward and late, but late truth still had some worth. Captain Hollies sent word that Cutter had been moved under heavier guard, pending federal charges. The dead marshal's body had been recovered. Judge Fitch denied everything and grew old by 10 years in a week. One afternoon Nanton rode to Elias' place with a sack of dried meat and a message from 2 hawks. For the children, he said, then added after a pause, and for the man who could have chosen easier. Elias took the sack. Tell him thank you. Nanton studied the yard where Anna and Ben played by the trough. My grandfather says peace begins when someone refuses the simple hate. He say how to keep it. He says that part is harder. Then, as if embarrassed by his own words, the young man rode off. Summer laid gold over the valley. Grass rose, cattle fattened. Even the evenings seemed to breathe easier, yet nothing worth keeping ever came without one last test. It arrived in town on a hot afternoon when Elias took hides to the tannery, and Clara asked to come along for cloth and lamp oil. The children rode in the wagon between them, Anna delighted by the outing, Ben drowsing under the brim of Elias' spare hat. They had nearly finished when 3 men stepped from the shade beside the feed store, brothers of one of the ranchers named in the paper. Elias knew them by face and by the smell of grievance coming off them like sour mash. Broad men, red-necked, used to their size meaning more than law. The eldest, Hiram Vale, planted himself in the street. Mercer. Elias reined in. Clara went very still beside him. Vale's gaze slid to her and back. You stirred up rot that should have stayed buried. Elias said, move. Vale smiled. Judge says my brother might lose everything. Should have thought on that before stealing. A murmur passed among the men on the boardwalks. No one came closer. Vale's smile vanished. You took a side against your own. There was no own in it. That's where you're wrong. He took one step nearer the wagon. Folks notice when a man chooses savages and drifters over decent people. Before Elias could answer, Anna rose to her knees in the wagon seat. My mama ain't a drifter. The street seemed to sharpen around that small voice. Vale sneered. Then what is she? Clara put a hand on Anna's shoulder, but the girl had already spoken. Sometimes truth leapt before fear could catch it. Elias climbed down from the wagon. He did not move fast. That was the thing that changed the air. Fast men looked angry. Slow men looked certain. Vale saw it. So did his brothers. Elias stopped an arm's length away. "You insulted a woman under my protection. You frightened children in the street. You'll step back now." "Oh, what?" The old frontier question. Men asked it when they hoped violence would answer for them. Elias looked at the ring of faces on the porches. The shopkeepers, teamsters, a preacher, 2 boys with flour on their sleeves from the bakery. People who had spent years letting fear choose the next thing for them. Then he said, clear enough for all to hear, "Or every man in this town will see exactly what sort you are." A curious thing happened then. No one laughed. No one looked away. Even Vale sensed the ground shifting under him, not enough to make him good, enough to make him cautious. Sheriff Dobbins stepped off the boardwalk at last. He was not a brave man by nature. But perhaps the times had moved farther than he liked without him. "That's enough, Hiram." Vale turned. "You going to arrest me for talking?" "Maybe for blocking the street." Dobbins touched the butt of his revolver, then glanced at Elias and Clara, then at the crowd. "Maybe for being a damned fool in public." A ripple of hard amusement moved through the onlookers. Vale's ears reddened. He stepped aside with murder still in his eyes, but prudence stronger in his feet. Elias climbed back into the wagon. As they rolled on, Clara sat very quiet. At the edge of town, she said, "That would not have happened a month ago." "No. What changed?" Elias flicked the reins lightly. "People saw a lie crack." She studied him, then the road ahead. "And you?" He did not answer that. Harvest neared. Clara healed. The children rooted themselves deeper into the place with each passing day. Ben began calling the barn cat General for reasons known only to himself. Anna learned to read from an old primer Elias had kept packed away from his own boy's things. The first time he brought the book out, his hand had trembled so badly he nearly set it back on the shelf. Clara saw. She laid her palm over his hand and said only, "We can stop." He looked toward Anna waiting eager at the table, lips moving silently over letters she did not yet know. "No," he said, "we can't." So the primer opened. Grief opened with it, not all at once, just enough for light to slip through. The evenings grew cooler. One night after the children had gone to sleep, Elias sat on the porch steps with Clara beside him and the whole dark valley breathing around them. "You ever think of leaving now?" he asked. She considered. "Sometimes I think of what leaving used to mean, always running toward the next place before trouble found the last." She looked out over the pasture silvered by moonlight. "This is the first place in a long time where I've thought of winter stores before escape routes." He felt that in his chest. She added softer, "Do you want us gone?" The honest answer frightened him by how quickly it rose. "No." She let the words settle. He stared at the yard rather than at her. "I don't know much about beginning again." "Neither do I. I know fences, haying, how to lose arguments to 5-year-old girls." That drew a quiet laugh from her. He went on, "Because if he stopped now, he might never speak. But if you stayed, if all of you stayed, I'd try not to do it poorly." Clara turned to him then. Moonlight caught the line of her cheek and the small scar left near her ribs where the wound had closed. Elias Mercer, that may be the strangest way a man has ever offered a future. "It's the only one I have." Her eyes shone, though whether from tears or light he could not tell. Then I accept the strange version. For a long moment neither moved. Then her hand found his on the step between them. It was not the grip of desperation from the day she reached his gate, not the frantic clutch of a hunted woman begging for her children's lives. It was steadier than that, chosen. Autumn came with clear skies and sharp mornings. Captain Hollies wrote that Cutter had been convicted in military court and would hang after transfer under federal authority. More importantly, the testimony had pulled down 3 more names. One trader fled south. Another turned evidence to save his skin. Judge Fitch's power broke like rotten timber. There would still be men willing to lie for profit. There always were. But for a time at least, they would look over their shoulders before naming their greed honor. On the first cold day of the season, 2 hawks rode to Elias Ranch with Nanton and a wagon carrying timber cut from the upper basin. For the school corner Vernon's wife keeps talking about, he said. Elias blinked. You heard about that? News crosses faster than rivers. By afternoon, men from town arrived too, awkward, suspicious, willing. A preacher brought nails. Me Pike brought soup enough for an army. Even Sheriff Dobbins came with a hammer and a face that implied he hoped no one would make much of it. They raised a small outbuilding near the main house before sundown. Nothing grand. Just 4 walls, a stove, windows, and room enough for children from scattered ranches to learn letters through winter when work eased. Anna watched as if a church were rising. Ben mostly cared for the boards he was allowed to carry. At dusk, with the last plank in place, 2 hawks stood beside Vernon and looked over the new building. Vernon said, "Strange world." 2 hawks replied, "Better strange than dead." Vernon thought on that and nodded. The valley did not become holy after that. Men still quarreled. Stock still went missing. Storms still ruined fences and babies still took feversome winters despite every prayer in reach. Peace was never a clean thing. It had to be fed like stock and watched like fire. But something had shifted. A woman once hunted through the brush could walk into town and buy flour without lowering her head. A little girl who had hidden evidence in her hem could sit at a desk with other children and sound out words slowly, triumph, lighting her face 1 letter at a time. A little boy who had thrown a carved horse at a killer could sleep through thunder now without crying. The man who had spent years alone with ghosts found that a table sounded different when set for 4. The first snow of winter came early. It dusted the fence rails, the barn roof, the cottonwoods by the creek. Elias stood in the doorway at dawn, watching the flakes move slantwise through the blue-gray light. Behind him, he heard the house waking Ben's small feet, Anna asking where her primer had gone, Clara stirring the stove and humming under her breath without knowing she did. He stepped onto the porch. The cold struck clean and honest. Out beyond the pasture, the valley lay quiet under its thin white veil, changed and unchanged all at once. Once, such a morning would have brought only memory, the ache of names not called, the old weight of what could not be mended. The ache was still there, it always would be. Grief did not leave because love came again, it only learned to share the room. He heard Clara at the door behind him. A blanket slipped around his shoulders. He had not heard her cross the floor. "You'll freeze standing admiring weather," she said. "Maybe." She came to stand beside him. Their breaths smoked in the same air. From inside, Anna called. Ben took the good cup again, and Ben shouted back something indignant and impossible to understand. Clara smiled into the morning. "Your children are at war." Elias looked toward the window where their small shapes flashed past. then out over the land, then at the hand she had left resting on his arm. "No," he said quietly, "not mine alone." She turned her face up to his. There was winter around them and warmth at his side and life in the house behind them, imperfect and hard-won and real. Far off, a hawk crossed above the creek, wings dark against the whitening sky. The valley felt different now, not because evil had vanished, not because justice had finished its work. Those things were never final on any frontier in any age. It felt different because, once, a woman had begged to be left behind, and one stubborn cowboy had refused. The choice had cost him peace as he understood it then. It had given him a truer one in return. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help this old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, every sunset still matter. So, till we meet again. Friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.